recording this webinar, so we can share it after the fact. I want to just start by thanking you all for being here. This is our first foray into a virtual education session. We took a couple of months off when we started doing our in-person meetings at the beginning of this year. Obviously, COVID-19 impacted our future plans for that. So we took a little bit of time, and what we really wanted to do is look at what gap we could fill in the education market during this time. I'm sure you're all aware that there's been many webinars around how to open your building safely and keeping your occupants' health in mind. But there isn't really anything that is touching upon that with the lens of sustainability in mind as well. So we have a few sessions here scheduled that kind of look at some of those issues, starting with this first one of reopening your buildings with health and sustainability in mind. We have some great speakers lined up today to talk about lessons learned from their experiences in reopening construction sites and some of their buildings, and kind of the things that they have learned and what the impact has been on energy use and water use. So we're going to start as soon as I can click slides. I'll go through the names first, and then we'll get to the future sessions. So first up today, we are going to hear from Lease Crutcher Lewis. We have Juliana Plant, Senior Project Manager, Rob Shuck, Project Manager, and Jeremy Callis, Senior Project Manager, who are all going to talk about their respective sites and what they've done to kind of keep their workers healthy and the kind of schedules in opening that up and some of the impacts that they've seen just on a construction site level. And then we have GLY speaking. So we have Eric Bedell, a mechanical specialist, and Laura Soma, a project manager and sustainability specialist, who are both going to be talking about the impacts that they've seen on HVAC equipment and kind of how that can positively impact your sustainability and your energy efficiency if done right. And then lastly, but very not least, we have Skanska and Stuart Germain, who is a senior manager in real estate development. And he is going to be talking about opening a new building during this time. So To a New is a brand new building in downtown, and the things that they're seeing and what tenant improvements are looking like during this time. So back to the future sessions. Like I mentioned, we have been really kind of concentrating on what kind of things we can present to members to be of value to you during this time. I know that your time is extremely limited during this because there are multiple fires that you have to put out on a daily basis. So we're starting with this project, and then in June, we're going to be doing a session with Commute Seattle. Topic is to be determined, but very much centered around the impacts on transportation when we start to reopen things. So how can we keep bringing people into downtown safely, but without having everyone drive to work and causing mass traffic jams around? And in June, we're also going to just do a Seattle 2030 District 101. It's just a reminder of everything that we do with the district, kind of where we are, the programs that we work on, just so you can kind of be an advocate and talk to those things in your company or to your clients. In July, we're going to be looking at what measures you can take while your building is still closed or has very low occupancy to prepare for that full occupancy. August, looking at the ventilation rates in your building to really gear up for what is going to happen in the winter months. And then lastly, in September, we're going to have a session on financing and sustainability measures and investment during the possible recession that is coming. Lastly, before we really get going, I just want to thank our sponsors. This has honestly become a very important piece to the nonprofit world during this time. funding is definitely going to be harder to come by in the next year or so, given where we are. So huge thank you to our sponsors that really allow us to put sessions like these on and do all the great work that we're doing. So with that, I will hand it over to Juliana.
Don't forget to unmute yourself, Juliana.
Perfect. Good morning, everyone. Can you guys see my screen okay? Perfect.
I cannot see your screen yet.
You cannot see my screen. How about now?
There you go.
Okay. So good morning, everybody. We are going to go through, oh dear. There we go. Some lessons learned from our team at Lewis. Rob and Jeremy are going to speak to a couple things. But the construction industry has been able to open back up, and there's quite a few things that we've done with planning and preparedness. So we'll go through some of the preparation and communications, some things that we've learned about forms, training and tracking, managing everybody coming back, pinch points and things like that, the cleaning, the wash, rinse, repeat, and then taking advantage of the time and space that you have now, as well as some communication and feedback to kind of circle it back. Let's get started here. So preparation and communication. We don't know when everybody's going to be able to come back to work. Some of that's determined by the state, some of that's determined by county, and some of it's just individual company decisions on how they're going to come back. So it's important to start, if you have not already, just to be prepared. But one of the things that our company did is had a management huddle, either daily or weekly, and that was just to get a consistent message out to the team, and really looking at that from a high level all the way out to individual job sites and making decisions on a job site per job site basis, as they're all different. But having something that everybody can have consistent across all the job sites was really important. And then really coming up with a handbook and a guidebook and establishing templates so that people had some resources as they were coming back to work, and then training. So go through that. What's really important is just to have some huddles to discuss and get prepared to react to changes and assess situations. But what was really important was to go through the what if scenarios. So you had some ability to plan and have some discussion without being under pressure for the unknowns. So none of the stuff is new. I mean, it's all part of business, but it's super important now since there's so many uncertainties. And that could be coming back to work, how you're going to prepare your building physically for changes coming back, as well as people coming back. So one thing with stocking up supplies, just making sure you've got that organized. But it's really to support our local economy, not only just so we can, as Washington State, get back prepared, but also, you're getting stuff from a local place and reducing the amount of energy and effort it takes to get these materials. So there's some information that was published by the state for rebound and recovery, and you can access local PPE and cleaning supplies and get those to your site. The other thing is creating templates and signage and tools around it. And so one of the things we found that was helpful is you could have all the written signs in the world, but it was very difficult for people to follow. So really important to have visual signs. And we'll talk about kind of some of the thoughts and different things we had with taking the stairs and how that worked on there. So I'll turn it over to Jeremy now and talk about some of the approaches we had with people coming to the site and forums and training moving forward.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So mentioned earlier, Jeremy Callis, Senior PM with Lewis. I work primarily in our corporate market, which is build out the office interiors and things of that nature. Specifically for me and my group, it's all tech, TI downtown in different buildings, mostly Class A buildings downtown. And so, you know, this approach on these different things, if you want to go to the next slide, is it's planning around each building and job site specifically. And I know Stuart will allude to it more just because we're doing quite a bit of work in his building right now, but it's approaching each building and understanding the requirements, not only for the safety of the individuals and the people that are working in the building, but then also make sure that we're maintaining all the requirements that have been set forth by the mandate from the governor's office. And so there's just a certain level of steps that need to be done as far as getting people into the space, keeping track of who's coming in and out. And there's a lot of questions that go with that. So going back to what Juliana said, you know, planning and preparation in advance around this was really important, and just consistency within our company to develop a plan that worked for all of the projects with slight modifications just based off of the requirements. So as far as who we're monitoring coming in, right now it's everybody. If you're on site, you get checked in, and that you go through a process for that check-in. As of right now, we are required to take people's temperatures. If it's over a certain point, then there's some follow-up questions, and more than likely they're not allowed to be on the job site. And then there's a list of 6 questions that are being asked just around health and wellness. There's some questions that got really sensitive just because of HIPAA and privacy laws and whatnot. And so we're not, as Lewis, we are not individually tracking those questions. We're basically saying, do you answer yes to any of these questions? And if so, then we need to step aside, and there's kind of some follow-up that occurs beyond that. That entire process, depending on the size of the job site, the way that we've kind of tried to streamline it with different projects, it's about a 10 to 15 minute process. Depending on the building, that determines where we do the check-in at 2&U, and I'm assuming Stuart will allude to this, but we are fortunate to have space to do, we queue up outside and then in the main elevator lobby. We are at Century Square doing a couple of projects, and for that building, we have people queue in the loading dock to get up the freight elevator, and then they do their check-in when they come off the freight elevator. And then as far as social distancing when they come into the building, we'll touch on this a little bit further on, but it's just identification of pinch points and things like that. When you get into the forms and training and whatnot, as far as people coming in and out, once you're checked in, you are allowed to come and go. You just have to check in daily. We decided to, in order to be able to determine who checked in and who wasn't, we do a colored wristband each day. And so it's like one that you get if you go to a club or a concert or something, just to show that you've been there. And then as far as travel between floors, we have kind of upstairs staircases for up and staircases for down, which we'll speak to in a minute. And if the work cannot be done within 6 feet right now, it cannot occur. That is phase 1. Phase 2, which we're hoping comes out soon, you are allowed to develop plans around that 6 foot distance, which is great because there are certain tasks and activities that we just simply can't do in construction safely without being within 6 feet of each other. So that's something that we're definitely working on. As for the next slide. So one of the things that we did as we were bringing our job sites back online, as we had the Lewis team on site first, they went through all of the training, put up the signage, the flow of traffic, things like that. Then we brought back all these subcontractor foremen, did a day of training with them, got them up to speed on what was going on. And then we worked out plans for staggered starts and things of that nature. The other thing that we did for checking in is we found a system through, there's a couple of different programs you can use, but we basically created a QR code check-in system where you can scan a QR code with your phone. The information that's needed for documentation is, it's on a form that after they push enter, it actually downloads to a spreadsheet that you can download. And so it's all hands-free to where we're not having to worry about sanitizing pins and things of that nature. Some job sites, quite a few of the job sites at Lewis are utilizing that. It's been really smooth. There was a little bit of pushback on a couple sites just from some different subcontractors as far as utilization of personal cell phones for work and things like that. And so we just found workarounds on those sites.
Great, thank you. Good morning. My name is Rob Shook. Similar to Jeremy, I'm also in the corporate market sector, working 100% of my time is out on the Microsoft campus in Redmond. We've probably got about 10 to 12 projects right now out there that we've had to kind of go through the site evaluation and think about, okay, now that these projects are getting up and going again, and we're going to be on site in a bunch of separate buildings, how do we manage the flow and how do we manage this, keep people safe on site? So Jeremy talked about the strategies we're using for check-in just to get into the building. With that, there's some things to think about. How do we try and create as much efficiency as possible? Jeremy said it's about 10 minutes to get people in. That's been pretty true so far. And one of the things that we've tried to do is staggering start times or staggering hours of operation for different trades. So rather than just bringing everybody into the project all at once, we've tried to do like a 4 a.m. start and then a separate group that comes in at 6 a.m. Just to try and alleviate some of the congestion that could build up. Other things have been, we've considered doing elevator monitors. So depending upon the building that we're in, trying as much as possible just to use stairs. And just like Jeremy said, we've designated stairs that only up on certain stairs and only down on others. And that really eliminates any passing within 6 foot that could occur. Where we have had to use elevators, our wellness monitor and site safety supervisor have been doing our best with the signage to ensure that no more than 1 or 2 people are in the elevator at a time, but also having somebody there to enforce that. When you're going up and down the elevator a lot with carts, it can be tempting, especially as the day goes on, to start kind of trying to fudge the rules a little bit. So ensuring that there's some enforcement around that to keep people safe has been critical. Lots of signage. We found out at Microsoft that even though they don't have a clear plan for bringing people back yet, there are some business groups that are exempt from having to work from home right now, and so using the signage not just for our own crews, but in some buildings that have some occupancy. If we have a lot of clear signage and verbiage around that, we found that the building occupants are also very, very amenable to following that signage as well. So, that means similar to like going to the grocery store right now, there's foot or feet in different aisles telling you which way to walk. We've done that in several of the hallways to keep the occupants flowing in the same direction. And that way we're not crossing paths with them and, potentially endangering them or us. Not just, staggering the start times also means the break times will be staggered. And so that's been really, really good for keeping down the quantity of people in one room at a time. I've always been a big proponent of trying to go as paperless as possible, and we try and be as lean as possible in that way. And this has just been another opportunity to really further that. If we don't have people building up at copy rooms and printers and scanners, or sharing a lot of hard copy documents, this is a good opportunity to kind of +1 a lot of those things and move things digitally so that we're not having to touch the same stuff. Also, depending on the building, we're fortunate at Microsoft, they've got a lot of unisex restrooms or single occupancy, all gender restrooms. So that's made some things easy, but there are some buildings where we've definitely implemented a strategy of like blocking off every other stall or every other urinal. Lots and lots of sanitation stations. Sometimes what we've done is not just relied on the building restrooms, but also put some in near the check-in station, or put some in a parking lot if we're working on the first floor, just to ensure that people feel really comfortable with the amount of washing that they can do. And Jeremy, I think you can touch on that some more.
Yeah, so there's definitely more cleaning that needs to happen. Try and keep our job sites as clean as possible to begin with, but this is more into sanitation and things like that. And so there's some steps that you can take around this, as far as to avoid having to over clean, keeping doorways open where we can while keeping spaces secure. It's just more washing of things like handrails and things like that. Restrooms, we're coming through and cleaning those on a more regular basis. With that, it's really an evaluation as well, just from a water usage standpoint. Clearly, you're using additional water and supplies for that. So just finding containers that can be refilled and they're not single use. Trying to keep, if you have automatic faucets in your bathrooms and things like that, that's helpful. But we do have, as far as we've got a single person dedicated solely on each job site that they're cleaning at this point. They're wiping down different areas, frequently touched locations and things like that. We have to go back and sanitize tools. Tools have been kind of established as a single use per person. So there are some additional tools on site to avoid having to go and continually sanitize between each individual. Looked at things like, how do we clean electronics without breaking them all? So just wiping down printers and copiers. So that's all stuff that you have to think about as well.
Okay, and then just a couple examples of, okay, the buildings are empty. What can we do from a sustainability perspective while there aren't occupants around and maybe we don't have to do things off hours? One of the big things that we've seen come out is changing out light fixtures in some of the older buildings or even in their leased sites. We've got a couple projects going where we're replacing every single light fixture in the building. So that's 1,500, 2,000 fixtures, changing them to LED. And we're actually seeing quite a bit of savings on a project like that because we're not working off hours, we're not working around people in their workstations. And so there's been a good opportunity to do that. Adding occupancy sensors, adding dimming. We've seen some of these projects expand where it was just the fixtures and now they're also adding some dimming and additional occupancy sensors. Projects that we have in pre-construction right now on campus are pretty much all talking about, okay, we're still somewhat early on. Let's talk about elevators and how we can do no touch options, and how can we implement that now, looking forward and seeing that could be a concern. And also talking about the auto operators that are just all over campus for accessibility and how we can install more of them and use more of the wave to open devices as opposed to push buttons, and that eliminates a lot of the touching. And then plenty of discussion around mechanical zoning, upgrades to the mechanical and some smart building things and controls, since we're seeing not just full load and full capacity all the time. And as we start to come back, or as the campus starts to get refilled, what does it look like for the mechanical system to operate as efficiently as possible with only maybe 25 to 40% of the occupants in the building at a time?
Great. So just following up, you have feedback and communication. on what you're doing, and really reaching out and reward innovation and ideas coming from people. So that's the way we're going to keep moving forward, to find both solutions for the people and how we can continue with our sustainability goals. And then start communicating the next steps to everybody.
Thank you. That was super informative for me. I hope it was for everyone else. One thing I did want to add that I did not mention at the top of this was that we are going to be going through these presentations like you've just seen. And then hopefully we will have some time for a Q&A at the end. Feel free to use the chat function to put questions in there, just so I can read through it fairly easily, or I can see your name and I can call on you to ask your question directly. And with that, I will hand it over to the GLY team.
Thank you, Matthew. Laura, I'll bring it up. See if you see it. Hold on for a second. Is it sharing?
Not yet.
There you go.
Hold on. Let me see if I can do this now. Is it sharing now?
Yeah.
There you go.
All right. All right, Laura, you want to kick it off? And
Sure. So we're going to talk about mainly the HVAC systems and the impacts. If you want to go to the next slide.
Yeah.
So Eric's going to talk about the higher efficiency filters, increasing the concentration of outside air. I'm going to go through what the CDC and ASHRAE are suggesting, and then provide some pros and cons, but there's some pretty good benefits. So Eric?
Yeah. Hello, I'm Eric Bedell. I'm MEP specialist for GLY. Prior to GLY, I was a senior mechanical engineering manager for a large design build mechanical contractor, and specialized in healthcare, laboratory, biotech design, among others. But that was my tranche in the engineering world prior to GLY 6 years ago. So it's been interesting, I have to say, in the last 2 to 3 months. Generally, HVAC is usually the expensive thing that the owners don't really care about so much, other than energy efficiency and some sustainability things. It's how do we get it lower? It's a little bit more of a black box to say. So it's been pretty interesting hearing from other people actually asking me questions about what we can do to protect against COVID. Usually that's not the #1 priority on owners or clients or people's minds these days. So it's been fun to say that we, something I'm passionate about. So it's been pretty interesting to see this. But ultimately, the biggest thing that I've heard or been asked questions about is the use of high efficient filters in the air handling units. And it's been very interesting, and a very interesting response, I think, from myself, and I would say other mechanical engineers, because I've spoken to other mechanical engineers too, on what they're hearing and what they're either specifying or wanting to specify. It's really easy in new buildings to have that conversation. And buildings and design, especially right now, that is coming up, at least for existing, for new air handlers, and to accommodate, either install day 1 or accommodate for a day 2 solution for high efficient filters. And these high efficient filters, they're basically, there's things that come along with these. They're bigger, so units get bigger. The filter racks need to get bigger. They're also, they load up quicker. So again, you need a little bit more fan horsepower generally. The pressure drop through the filter, even when it's new, is higher. So again, a little higher efficiency horsepowers in the units themselves, and then just the maintenance overall for them. I mean, the protocols to change out a high efficient filter is just higher, right? So you see in the healthcare industry and the biotech and the laboratory industry, they have all those protocols in place. Grocery stores, even some commercial buildings or warehouses, or a lot of places, restaurants that the public, they don't have any of these protocols or the ability. So that's what I'd like to go over a little bit today. And then Laura's, like I said, is going to go through the CDC guidelines, ASHRAE guidelines, and the pros and cons. And so this is something I had a MERV, right? Everyone here is MERV, or it's the minimum efficiency reporting value. It's just a normal definition that probably most people on this call will forget, but it's out there. It's a standard by ASHRAE, how to report, and it's generally the percentage of particulates that is filtered out. And we use 0.3 to 1 micron. This is something else I want to go over real quick. Is doing some research a couple months ago. I started researching viruses and the size of viruses. And what I noticed in a lot of the publications was that viruses are 0.3 microns and smaller, which is pretty small, but the carriers or the hosts that the viruses move about, which is like water droplets or dust particles, are generally larger, a 1 micron and above, which is very important in the filter world. It was, so a lot of filters, especially in healthcare and greater, can protect the human inhabitants, right? So what we noticed is that 85–90%, which is MERV 11s to 13s, typically used in high-end commercial office. That's usually 60–90% filters. So that means that anything above 1 micron, 60% is filtered out. So again, there's a standard of protection there that they are filtering out a lot of a virus in general, in addition to all the dust and I guess you could say water droplets in some cases. 95%, which is MERV 15, that is used in healthcare facilities. That's a final filter. You have to do that. So that again will get most of your sneezes, your water droplets. It's in some people, they do MERV 15 in really high-end commercial buildings that we're seeing with some of our clients, where IAQ is really important. And then you get the questions that I've been asked numerous times, which is HEPA filtration, which is generally found in laboratory filters, which it will get 99.9% of anything above 1 micron, which it's going to filter out most of all your viruses. And then again, we'll go over the CDC. I don't want to take away about the increased filters, but the other thing that was asked for me is higher concentrations of outside air, which is generally a great practice. Newer buildings are going above ASHRAE standards. You'll see many commercial office buildings going 30%, having a standard specification of 30%. Higher concentration of outside air. However, in existing buildings, that's sometimes not feasible. Literally just due to the capacity and the heating and cooling capacity of the units itself. So it's not as easy as just, hey, let's open up the damper or allow outside air. But any mechanical contractor or mechanical engineer in the Puget Sound will help any existing building owner through that. But that's something that actually can be accommodated, I feel like, for a majority of the year. And then the last one, which we'll go over, Laura will go over, which is increased maintenance frequency of mechanical equipment. I just want to say one thing on that. I was asked by one of my neighbors actually on this earlier on, and when was the last time you really changed your air filter in your residential unit? So just changing maintenance and just increasing your maintenance frequency can help it significantly. So Laura, I'm gonna move on to the next slide.
Perfect. Okay, so my name is Laura Soma. I'm a project manager and sustainability specialist with GLY. I've been with them for 22 years, and I've done a number of positions, but I've been involved in sustainability since 2009. So GLY also hosts the Seattle Eastside Collaborative for the Living Future Institute. If you're interested on that, give me a holler and I'm happy to put you on our list. Okay, so when it comes to addressing our HVAC systems in response to the contagiousness of COVID-19, I'm mainly talking about gearing towards our existing buildings. So you can move to 100% outside air to minimize the amount of air that gets recirculated around the building, which is great in theory, but not all of the systems are designed to run 100% outside air 24/7. We can also upgrade the types of filters used in our systems, but not every system can accommodate a MERV 13 filter because they're big. Additionally, it requires more energy, like Eric was talking about, for the system to push the air through a MERV 13 filter. So there's other steps you can take if you can't upgrade your current systems to the larger filter. The CDC and the May 2020 ASHRAE Journal have shared the following suggestions for existing buildings. Increase your ventilation rates, ensure ventilation systems operate properly and provide acceptable indoor air quality for the occupancy level in each space that they have right now. Increase outdoor air ventilation, but they caution if you're in a highly polluted area. I think we're okay in the Puget Sound. But with the lower occupancy level in the building, this increases the effective dilution ventilation per person. They recommend that you disable the demand control ventilation, so your DCV. They also note to further open minimum outdoor air dampers as high as 100% to reduce or eliminate recirc, which is great in mild weather. It won't affect thermal comfort or humidity, but it gets a little sticky when it's super hot or super cold outside. Improve central air filtration to the MERV 13 or highest compatible filter that'll fit within the filter rack. And then they also note to seal the edges of the filter to limit any particles from bypassing it. They note to check filters to ensure that they are within the service life and appropriately installed. Side note on that, you'd be surprised at how many filters are installed backwards and they don't work that way. And then they note to keep the systems running longer, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week if possible. And that's just to enhance the number of air exchanges in the building space to kind of clean it out. Kind of like flushing out our building when we're going for our lead flush out points, right? Okay, so there's pros and cons to that. On the pros, there's increased cognitive function and productivity for the occupants. In 2016, Harvard published a study researching the impacts of indoor air quality on cognitive function. They did a double-blind test, and they looked at the changes in cognitive function between conventional office conditions, green conditions, and then green plus conditions, which include spaces with low VOCs and enhanced ventilation. So what they found is the cognitive performance scores in the green plus environments was 61% higher than your standard office building. So for the naysayers, I think if all of your employees were performing 61% higher, I think you might want to look at some green construction. The largest improvements they found came in crisis response strategy and information usage. There's also been just a multitude of studies which have confirmed that lower indoor pollutants create a higher level of productivity, which is beneficial to both the companies and the workers in the buildings. Harvard Business Review has findings that show white-collar workers are 5 to 6% more productive when air pollution levels are rated as good by the EPA. So that's an air quality index of 0 to 50. And that test was done in China. So I thought that was very interesting. The other benefits to adjusting your current HVAC systems to reflect the COVID age is it provides a greater sense of security for the building occupants, whether they're your tenants or they're your employees. For people to know that you care enough to make these changes to your buildings, regardless of what the financial cost is on you as the building owner or as the employer, it's going to mean a lot to your building employees and your occupants. And the other thing it does is it helps to keep the building occupants healthier. Nobody gets much done if all your employees call out sick. And then some of the cons is that it does create greater wear and tear on the equipment if it's not designed for 100% outside air or the larger filters. 100% outside air works great in moderate climates, but it can overtax the system for extreme heating or cooling. And then, you know, higher energy costs. Now, when it comes to the higher energy costs, if that's your concern, or if that's your client's concern, in this area, in this region, Puget Sound Energy and Seattle City Light both have green power options. So PSE allows you to purchase 100% green energy, solar and wind. They also, and this I just found out, and I do this for my house, is they have a carbon offsetting program. So you can purchase carbon credits to help mitigate your carbon footprint, which relatively inexpensive. And I purchased enough carbon credits that all my natural gas used in my house to heat my home is being taken care of. They have an agreement with a forest in Southeast Washington. So I thought that was really cool. And then Seattle City Light also offers a Green Up program where business owners can purchase renewable energy credits that essentially is adding the green power to the grid. SCL shows it as solar, wind, and hydroelectricity. Currently the rate is 1.5 cents per kilowatt, and they sell it in blocks of 200, 400, or 800 kilowatts. 800 kilowatts is $12 a month. That being said, if you have a larger commercial space, you can contact Seattle City Light, and they'll work with you to figure out what's going to best meet your needs and your goals. And I've put links to both of those options on the PowerPoint. You can look at, if you're in Seattle or outside the greater Seattle area, you can do this for your house as well. So if you want to personally make sure that you are you know, doing the best for the environment with your personal energy use and your carbon footprint, I would definitely check out these programs if you haven't already. Next slide.
Go.
That's it. The end.
Thank you, Laura.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you both.
Hold on for a second. Just let me see how to do this. What am I doing wrong here? Stop share. There we go.
There you go. All right, and then last but not least, I'll hand it over to Stuart with Skanska to talk about his experience at 2NU.
Great, thank you. I'm going to reiterate a lot of the great information that was put out there, but talk about it in a project-specific format. A little background on myself. I'm a senior manager, development manager with Skanska Commercial Development. I've been with the group for almost 8 years now. Let's see, working on the screen share real quick. Trying to do two things at once. All right. So yeah, so I've been with Skanska Commercial Development for almost 8 years. We're a small outfit, only 12 years old in the U.S., where we finance and develop projects, and then Skanska Construction builds. So we're involved in the land acquisition, design, lease up, divestment, the whole soup to nuts model. So we get to learn a lot from the construction side and put best practices in place in the buildings when we have the ability to. So you should see some pictures of 2NU up on the screen now. It's basically a 31-story office tower that's raised up on these big Y columns, 60 to 85 feet above the surrounding sidewalks, creating a public open space and plaza, 24,000 square feet of retail, 24,000 square feet of open space, and 6 to 8 different retail spaces down below on the ground plane. Just the design for this was, we really wanted to invite the city to come in and through the site and to engage with the building in sort of a non-traditional way, create this urban plaza that's sheltered from the rain by the building above, and provides kind of a living room for downtown. As I said, it was designed about 5 years ago. Construction completed essentially the end of last year. We got our C of O. The building's 100% leased on the office side to 4 tenants, 3 of whom are still heavily involved in their tenant improvement construction. Lease Crutcher Lewis is doing 2 of those build outs. So Jeremy's and the team is familiar with the project really well. We're targeting LEED Platinum. So we've taken a lot of steps towards sustainability in an effort to reach platinum and just to be a good steward. Skanska has really high internal goals for sustainability. We have a LEED Gold minimum for all development projects that we do, and some carbon neutrality goals. I think 2045 carbon neutral is our goal. So that's always comes in on the front end. The advantage of being kind of the developer is we can put those goals forward to the design team at the very beginning, whether it's the engineers or the architects or whoever, and integrate a lot of stuff. So with that in mind, some of the features. Well, I'll talk about some of the TI work right now, because, like I said, we got C of O in December, and what COVID has really done for us is kind of give us a slow roll into building operations. The bottom 3 floors, as I said, the tenant is built out and signed off and has some people occupying. They'll definitely have more once we get into phase 2 and phase 3 and people are allowed to come to work. But right now the building is essentially unoccupied with tenants. We also have 2 of the retail spaces fully built out. Again, they completed in January or February, so they're all teed up and ready to go, waiting. But the retail climate right now is pretty dicey. So Tavalata and Ladro aren't ready to come open up in a empty downtown. So with the remaining 28 floors or so that are in construction, 3 different groups of general contractors and their subcontractors, as well as some work that Skanska is still doing on site. The logistics of bringing people in and through the site, as Jeremy mentioned, was a real challenge. This open air plaza down below has really been a benefit for that. We were allowed to identify different building entrances and pathways so that the COVID screening can happen outdoors, temperature screening, the questionnaire and everything. So by the time everybody enters the building, they've been checked and signed off, and they either have the wristband or, they've been turned away, which I don't think has really happened yet. But it's kind of a byproduct of the lifted tower. Some other benefits that we have to the project. Actually, before I get to that, I think the other part is once everybody's screened, and then they get into the lobby, then we have opened up the passenger elevators. Typically during TIs, we limit all vertical transportation to the freight elevators. But in this case, we've opened up all of the passenger cabs. We've designated them so that they're tenant specific. So each contractor is using specific cabs. So there's no cross-pollination between elevator cabs and elevator floors. We can fit 2 people per elevator, but we've got over 200 craft workers on site daily right now, and so getting that many people up into the tower and then back down again is definitely a challenge. Staggered shifts, as LCL was talking about, and one-way stairs up and down. Fortunately, being a newer high-rise that has 4 stairs, so we can have a lot of different pathways for people to use the stairs once they're up. Most people don't want to start at the sidewalk level and walk up to level 28 to start their work day. But once they're up in the elevators, they're up there. So the picture here on the bottom center is our roof deck on level 19. So once we come into operations, between the public plaza space on grade will be open to the public, and then this roof deck is open to all tenants. So it's one thing that we're thinking about as advantage for office tenants once they're in here to be able to get light and air and open space, safely above the city. So a lot of the other things that we have, the features that we have in the building, really, when we were in design 5 years ago, I would look back and we really kind of set ourselves up to be in a good position for COVID and post-COVID world, just by trying to be innovative. We have a virtually hands-free operation of the project. Destination dispatch elevators. You still right now have to touch the screen in order to designate your floor, but we're working on reprogramming that so you can just swipe and get to where you need to go without having to touch anything. All the doors and pathways have ADA operators, so you can get in and out of the building without having to touch anything that way. Hard modern surfaces that were easy to clean, and I think one of the biggest things is our mechanical system, as what we were just talking about. We do have dedicated outside air supply systems on every other floor. So one unit serves its own floor and the floor below. 100% outside air on every floor that feeds out to a chilled beam system. So it's they're active chilled beams, heating and cooling. And so it's a low pressure, low volume system. So we're not really recirculating any, there's no return air. Everything's exhausted. And then because it's a lower flow, you're generally not stirring around as much air in the office spaces. So, and then, we do have MERV 13 filters throughout the space. I think a lot of what we're seeing, like I said, we're kind of slowly ramping up with building operations. We don't, unfortunately, have a baseline to see what building, energy or water usage was prior. But we're definitely keeping an eye on things. We're increasing some of the airflow, doing some flush outs before and after the day starts in the common areas. Property management has done a lot of work with the janitorial services, additional, they're going through all of the common spaces, all up and down the tower, making sure that, door handles and everything's wiped off, all of that stuff. But that's basically I feel proud, I guess, that we've put into effect a lot of these good ideas that the other panelists have talked about, and it'll be really interesting to see how, as the TIs finish out, how the tenants move into their spaces. We haven't seen, all our users are tech users. There's some pretty high density floors, some serious benching going on some of the office floors, and we've had some conversations with the tenants. They haven't talked about redesigning or decreasing their density or anything yet. So, right now, most of the TI work will be completed in the fall. So I think they're kind of waiting to see what the guidelines are, where the virus is at that time, to see who can come to work and when and how and whatnot. But for us, it's really just constant communication with the tenant contractors and the tenants themselves, doing the best that we can to listen. There's been a lot of really good sharing, between all the GCs on site as we were preparing to open back up and bring workers onto the site. It was, we can all get territorial sometimes, but it was not the case in this. I think there's a health and wellness was everyone's number one priority, and making a smooth operation, and everybody's working really well together. So yeah, I think that's the bulk of what I want to say. I see the only other thing that I see on my notes here is you've got another seminar on transportation coming up, and with that in mind, we are right on the 2nd Avenue sort of bike path that runs through downtown, and invested quite a lot for our tenants in terms of, there's like over 200 indoor bike storage, locker rooms with, showers and saunas and everything else like that, to really sort of, I think we're going to see a lot of two things: a lot more people driving single occupant vehicles, which is going to be a challenge for our garage, and then also hopefully a lot more people biking and coming into work that way. But that's, I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Yeah, I think your last point there is certainly one that we're conscious of as the Seattle 2030 district, particularly as things move forward, that we don't necessarily want to see that the massive increase in single occupancy vehicles. And hopefully if timing goes right and buildings start opening in the summer, it's certainly an ideal time to start biking to work. And the city of Seattle has worked pretty hard on creating that bike infrastructure over the last few years. We only had one question come through, and it's actually for you, Stuart.
Okay.
And I probably would have asked a question around this because I think it really highlights that by designing a building to LEED Platinum from the get-go, like you mentioned, you made those decisions pre-COVID, but it set you up for a success in this during this pandemic. So what are the kind of features or other features that were incorporated into 2&U to get to that LEED Platinum level?
You know, it's kind of an interesting story because we started the project and we kind of did an experiment within Skanska where we didn't look at LEED at all. We set up, before in the early design process, we set out values-based sustainability goals that we developed with internally and then with our consultants. And then it was only later on that we were sort of in construction documents that we you know, put it into the LEED scorecard and tried to see how we were doing. And then we made some adjustments at that point because we were really close to platinum just on our values-based approach. And so with that, we haven't really, I wouldn't say that we've done anything crazy to get to platinum. We've managed our water usage as much as possible, you know, low flow and touchless and all that sort of state of the shelf, you know, design guidelines and whatnot. And the DOAS system and chilled beams does help a lot in energy usage. I think there's a monitoring system that we were able to get some extra points for as kind of a pilot, like an innovation for the way that they're tracking, monitoring the energy use through the DOAS and the chilled beams. And then, you know, it's the usual, you know, trying to use as much local materials, and there's a lot of steel that was recycled, and, you know, concrete that was recycled and stuff like that. We just really kind of tried to do the best we could in all of the categories. There's not really any big innovations, which is kind of ironic compared to like Stone 34, our previous development, where, you know, it was the Living Building Pilot Program, or whatever Seattle called it when that was, that pilot. So, you know, that had a lot of interesting, innovative features, and, you know, I need to brush up my talking points a little bit better so I can, you know, say, how did we get to platinum in a more concise way? But, you know, it really just kind of feels like we just tried to do the right thing every time we had a choice to make. And that's how we got there.
Yeah, I think just to highlight,
it is,
obviously, no, go ahead, Stuart.
I was also going to say it's also not under LEED V4, so that makes a difference.
Oh, okay. One thing that I was going to mention, just because obviously we've worked with Skanska for quite a while, and I think they've created some of the more sustainable projects in Seattle. And based on kind of what you're saying about getting to LEED Platinum, by doing these things on a regular basis, it kind of just becomes the norm for how you're developing things, right? So it just becomes easier to implement a lot of those things as time goes on. So with that, we're almost at time. I just want to kind of summarize. I think we heard a lot of great information here today that will hopefully be of use to everyone. I think kind of starting with Lease Crutcher Lewis, just at a high level, just being prepared and communicating with your employees. I think during this time, over communication is definitely better than under communication. And then planning for those what if scenarios. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty around at the moment. So what do we do if things go back to different phases? Trying to support your local economy was definitely a good one for me, just because that is going to be so important to help us get going after this. Figuring out your check-in to the building. I really like the idea of using QR code so people can scan that on their phone. So it's really touchless in between two people, and people are really just using their own things. I think we all knew this one of wash, rinse, and repeat of everything. But to me, that really just highlights the importance of having water efficient fixtures in your building. So when people are washing their hands, at least they're doing it in the most efficient way possible. And then making use of this time where there's low occupancy. So putting in LEDs is definitely a super simple, low-hanging fruit that is surprisingly still available to a lot of people, and getting that. And then occupancy sensors, we talked a lot about no-touch options, getting into elevators, opening doors, etc. Smart building technology is definitely one that we're going to be looking at more in the next few months, and how you can integrate that into your building to really improve that efficiency, especially while people are off-site as well. And then HVAC upgrades is one that was talked about quite a lot, in the different benefits of using different systems. There may be kind of greater health benefits to using higher filtration, but it does come with its cons. And then using a DOAS system might be a better option if it's available to you. And then related to that, there should be any good mechanical specialist in Puget Sound should be able to help you with that. And the other one that I took from that is just, it's great to see HVAC having its moment and really letting that shine. I think that provides a great opportunity to educate some people about the benefits of going above and beyond just the black box. The other one that was kind of weaved in there, as we're all working from home right now, there are certainly options that you can do in your household that improve your sustainability. So kind of reaching out to your local utility and seeing what rebates and incentives are open to you to kind of make those improvements while you're working from home, to kind of keep that utility bill down that has likely increased over the last few months. And then at 2&U, we kind of already covered a lot of the stuff, but I think really the big benefit there is planning early on. And if you're a LEED Platinum building, or you're designed to be a very energy efficient building, then you already get those health benefits straight off the bat and make it easier to open for your tenants. And then somewhat related to 2&U, as there are 4 tenants, there is certainly an opportunity to, once people are in their company floors, that they can take the stairs in between those, and having options for people to take the stairs that are one way to avoid as much contact as possible. And really, that's kind of, I think, a good summary of everything that was here. I really want to thank everyone again for presenting here. Thank you all for coming. Like I said, we are recording this, so we will make the recording available to everyone after this, and we'll probably host it on our YouTube channel for people to rewatch. So thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Hopefully you get a chance to enjoy some of the sunshine outside, and I will see you all soon.
Thanks, Matt.
Great. Thank you so much.